The massive ships moved through space like giant jellyfish floating in a dark ocean. Their bodies glowed with soft blue and purple lights that pulsed slowly, creating beautiful patterns across their transparent hulls. These were the ships of the Velthari Empire, and they had traveled many light years to reach this small yellow star and its third planet. Admiral Kethvar stood in the command center of the largest ship. His tall, graceful body swayed gently as he moved, his long tentacle-like arms flowing behind him like silk ribbons. The bioluminescent patches on his translucent skin flickered with excitement. Today would mark the 18th world to fall under Velthari control. The data screens around him showed everything his scouts had learned about the planet called Earth. It looked perfect. Blue oceans covered most of the surface. White clouds swirled in gentle patterns, and green and brown land masses dotted the globe. The temperature readings showed it was neither too hot nor too cold. The gravity was a bit strong, but nothing they couldn't handle with their suits. "Admiral," said Science Officer Mortesla, her voice making a soft musical sound through the water-filled communication system. "The final reports from our advanced scouts have arrived." Kethavar's skin brightened with pleasure. "Show me what we've learned about these humans." The main display filled with images of the creatures that lived on this world. Kethvar studied them carefully. They looked small and weak compared to the Velthari. They had only 2 arms and 2 legs, no tentacles at all. Their skin looked thick and rough, not smooth and beautiful like proper, intelligent life. They seemed to walk around on just their 2 legs, which looked very unstable. They appear to be a primitive species. Mortesla continued. "Their technology is basic. They still burn fossil fuels for energy and use metal projectiles for weapons. Their largest cities hold only a few million individuals, and they seem to fight among themselves frequently." Kethvar nodded with satisfaction. This would be easier than taking the water world of Kelmaran, where the fish people had at least put up a decent fight before surrendering. These humans looked like they would give up after seeing just one Velthari ship. The Admiral moved to another display that showed their invasion plan. It was the same strategy that had worked on 17 other worlds. First, they would land a small force to establish a base. Then they would make contact with the local leaders and demonstrate their superior technology. Most species either ran away in terror or fell to their knees in worship. After that, it was simple to set up mining operations and move the natives to small areas where they could live peacefully under Velthari rule. "Have our scouts identified the best landing sites?" Kethvar asked. "Yes, Admiral. We have 3 locations picked out. All are in areas with low population density but close enough to major cities that news of our arrival will spread quickly. The humans will learn of our presence and their leaders will come to negotiate." Kethvar's tentacles waved with amusement. "Negotiate, as if they have any choice in the matter." Far below on Earth, Dr. Kim Taewon sat in his laboratory at Seoul National University, staring at data that made no sense. For the past week, his radio telescopes had been picking up strange signals from the edge of the solar system. The patterns were too regular to be natural, but too complex to be some kind of space junk. Taewon rubbed his tired eyes and looked at the numbers again. Whatever was out there was big, really big, and it was moving toward Earth, in a way that suggested intelligence behind the movement. "You look like you haven't slept in days," said Dr. Park, Minji as she entered the lab carrying 2 cups of coffee. Taewon accepted the coffee gratefully. "Because I haven't. Minji, look at these readings. Tell me what you think." Minji sat down next to him and studied the data on his computer screen. Her expression grew more serious as she scrolled through the information. "This can't be right. These energy signatures are enormous. And this movement pattern. It looks like a fleet of ships, doesn't it?" Taewon said quietly. Minji was quiet for a long moment. "How many governments have you contacted?" "All of them. The Americans think it's a solar storm. The Chinese say it's equipment malfunction. The Russians hung up on me." Taewon laughed bitterly. "Even our own government thinks I'm seeing things." "Maybe they're right," Minji said, but she didn't sound convinced. "Maybe we're just tired and seeing patterns that aren't there." Taewon pulled up another screen showing the most recent data. "Then explain this. Whatever these objects are, they just changed course. They're heading directly for Earth now, and they'll be here in less than 72 hours. Minji stared at the screen in silence. Finally, she spoke. "What do you think we should do?" "I think we should prepare for the possibility that we're about to have visitors. And I don't think they're coming to say hello." Meanwhile, in the Velthari fleet, final preparations were being made. The 3 scout ships that would make first contact were being loaded with translation equipment, recording devices, and enough firepower to level a small city if the humans proved troublesome. Commander Velkris led the first scout team. She was young for a Velthari officer, but she had proven herself during the conquest of the crystal beings of Zethmore. Her pale blue skin had earned her the nickname Iceflower among her crew. Remember, she told her team as they prepared to depart, these humans are primitives. They have never seen technology like ours. They will likely react with fear or wonder. Stay calm, demonstrate our power, and wait for their leaders to contact us. The scout ships detached from the main fleet like seeds dropping from a flower. They were smaller than the capital ships but still impressive, each one the size of a human city block. Their bioluminescent hulls began to glow brighter as they entered Earth's atmosphere, creating streaks of light across the night sky. On Earth, amateur astronomers and satellite tracking stations began reporting unusual objects. Social media filled with blurry photos and videos of strange lights. Most people assumed they were seeing meteors or space debris. But in his laboratory, Dr. Kim Taewon watched his instruments go wild as 3 massive objects descended through the atmosphere and disappeared into the mountains of Korea. "Minji," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "I think we're about to find out if we're alone in the universe." The Velthari had arrived. Confident in their superiority and certain of their victory, they had no idea that they were about to encounter something that would change everything they thought they knew about life in the galaxy. The 3 Velthari scout ships settled into a mountain valley like giant soap bubbles coming to rest on grass. Their translucent hulls shimmered in the morning sunlight, casting rainbow patterns on the rocks and trees around them. Steam rose from the ground where their landing systems had melted the frost. Commander Velkris emerged from the central ship first, her environmental suit making her look even more otherworldly than usual. The suit was designed to help her body cope with Earth's heavy gravity and thick atmosphere. Through the transparent material, her pale blue skin glowed softly, and her long tentacle arms moved in graceful waves. "The air composition is acceptable," reported her science officer through their communication system. "Gravity is 2.8 times standard, but our suits should handle it. Temperature is within acceptable ranges." Velkris nodded and gestured for her team to begin setting up their equipment. According to their plan, they would establish a base here, then wait for the local humans to discover them. It usually took a few days for primitive species to work up the courage to approach. 2 kilometers away, Lee Jinho was having the best camping trip of his life. He had been hiking in these mountains for 3 days, enjoying the peace and quiet after months of stressful work in Seoul. As a former Marine who now worked in mountain rescue, he knew these trails better than almost anyone. The strange lights in the sky the night before had been interesting, but Jinho figured they were probably meteorites. He had seen plenty of shooting stars during his years of camping. What he hadn't expected was to wake up and see 3 enormous glass domes sitting in the valley below his campsite. Jinho pulled out his binoculars and studied the objects carefully. They definitely weren't natural. The material looked like crystal or very thick glass, and there seemed to be movement inside them. As he watched, a section of one dome opened like a flower, and something stepped out. Even from a distance, Jinho could see that whatever came out of the dome was not human. It was too tall, moved too smoothly, and seemed to float rather than walk. His marine training kicked in, and he began to think tactically. First, he needed better information. Second, he needed to determine if these visitors were friendly or hostile. Jinho packed his camping gear quickly and started moving toward the valley. He stayed in the tree line, using the forest cover to get closer without being seen. His phone had no signal this deep in the mountains, but he made sure to take plenty of photos and videos as he approached. The closer he got, the more amazing the scene became. The beings that had emerged from the ships were unlike anything he had ever imagined. They stood about 8 feet tall and moved like dancers, their long arms flowing behind them as they worked. Their skin seemed to glow from within, and he could see complex patterns of light moving across their bodies. Jinho watched them for an hour, studying their behavior and equipment. They seemed to be setting up some kind of base camp, arranging strange devices in careful patterns around their ships. Their technology was clearly far beyond anything humans had developed, but their actions seemed peaceful enough. Finally, Jinho made a decision that would change history. He stood up, walked out of the tree line, and began approaching the alien camp in plain sight. The first Velthari to notice him was a young technician named Zilmora. She was adjusting a gravity manipulator when she saw the human walking toward them across the open ground. Her bioluminescent patches began flashing in alarm, and she called out to Commander Velcris, "Commander, there's a native approaching our position." Velcris turned to look and felt her skin patterns shift to display confusion. The human was walking directly toward them, showing no signs of fear or hesitation. This wasn't how first contact was supposed to work. Primitives were supposed to hide and watch from a distance, then slowly work up the courage to make contact over several days. "Is he armed?" Velcris asked. "I don't detect any weapons, Commander. He appears to be carrying some kind of recording device." Velcris watched as the human continued his steady approach. He was smaller than she had expected, probably only 6 feet tall, and he looked fragile compared to the graceful Velthari. But there was something about the way he moved that seemed oddly confident. When Jinho got within 50 meters of the aliens, he stopped and raised one hand in what he hoped was a universal greeting. Then he did something that had never happened in the history of Velthari first contacts. He spoke to them in a calm, normal voice. "Hello," Jinho said in Korean, then repeated it in English. "I'm not sure if you can understand me, but welcome to Earth." The aliens seemed to freeze in place. Their glowing patterns flickered rapidly, which Jinho guessed meant they were either excited or nervous. He decided to try a different approach. "I'm going to sit down now," he announced, then lowered himself to the ground cross-legged. "I'm not here to cause any trouble. I was just camping nearby and saw your ships." Commander Velcris felt her mind struggling to process what she was seeing. The human had approached them without fear, greeted them politely, and was now sitting calmly as if this were the most normal thing in the world. Where was the panic? Where was the awe at their superior technology? "Try the translator," she ordered her communications officer. A moment later, a mechanical voice spoke from their equipment in the human's language. "We are explorers from distant stars." "Do not be afraid," Jinho looked up with interest. "Oh, you have translation technology. That's convenient." He stood up and dusted off his pants. "Are you planning to stay long? This is actually a national park, so technically you might need permits." The Velthari stared at him in stunned silence. He was worried about permits? Velcris decided to demonstrate their power, hoping to get a more appropriate reaction. She gestured to one of her technicians, who activated a gravity manipulator. A boulder weighing several tons rose smoothly into the air and floated. "They're like a balloon. We possess technology beyond your understanding," the translator announced. Jinho watched the floating rock with the kind of mild interest someone might show for a street magician's trick. "That's pretty impressive," he said. Then he walked over to a boulder of similar size, bent down, and casually picked it up with his bare hands. The Velthari's bioluminescent patterns went completely white, which in their species indicated shock so severe it was almost like fainting. They watched in horror as this small, primitive creature lifted a mass that should have been impossible for his size and build to move, then tossed it aside like it weighed nothing. "Heavy gravity world," Jinho explained helpfully, noticing their reaction. "We're pretty strong compared to most things our size. But that floating trick is still cool. I'd love to know how it works." Commander Velcris realized that everything the Velthari thought they knew about first contact was wrong. This human wasn't afraid of them. He wasn't impressed by their technology, and he was casually demonstrating physical capabilities that should have been impossible. For the first time in her career, Velcris began to wonder if maybe the Velthari had made a serious mistake in coming to this world. Admiral Kethvar stared at the recording from the surface with growing horror. The image showed the human called Jinho sitting around a small fire with Commander Velcris and her team, sharing what appeared to be food and having a casual conversation. But that wasn't the terrifying part. The terrifying part was watching Jinho perform dozens of casual actions that should have been impossible. He gathered firewood by breaking thick tree branches with his bare hands. He started the fire by striking 2 rocks together hard enough to create sparks. When one of the Velthari mentioned being cold, he gave them his extra jacket and sat in the freezing mountain air wearing only a thin shirt, apparently comfortable. "Science Officer Mortesla," Kethvar called, his voice tight with concern. "I need a complete analysis of this planet. Everything. And I need it now." Mortesla's skin patterns showed confusion. Admiral, we already completed the planetary survey. Earth is a standard Class A7 world with acceptable environmental conditions. Look at the recordings again, HFY ordered. Look at what this human is doing and tell me how it's possible. As more Tesla began reviewing the data, more reports started coming in from around the planet. Other Velthari scout teams had made contact with humans in different locations, and every encounter was equally disturbing. In Australia, a human park ranger named Kylie had helped repair a damaged Velthari ship by bending metal support struts back into shape with her hands. The Velthari engineers watched in disbelief as she fixed damage that their own tools couldn't handle, then offered them sunscreen because the UV levels are pretty high today. In Canada, a group of human children had approached a Velthari landing site. Instead of running away screaming, they asked if the aliens wanted to play hockey. When the Velthari politely declined, the children demonstrated the game by hitting a hard rubber disc with wooden sticks at speeds that would have been lethal to most species. But the most disturbing report came from Brazil, where a Velthari science team had encountered a human construction worker named Carlos. When they asked about local wildlife, Carlos casually mentioned that he had wrestled a jaguar away from his lunch just last week. He showed them photos on his phone of various dangerous animals he had encountered, including venomous snakes, giant spiders, and crocodiles, all while smiling cheerfully. "Admiral," Mortesla said, her voice shaking, "I think we've made a terrible mistake." "Show me," HFY ordered, the main display filled with new data as Mortesla's computers recalculated everything they knew about Earth. The first shock was the gravity reading. What they had classified as moderately heavy was actually 3 times the galactic standard. Most civilized species would be crushed flat on this world. "The atmospheric pressure is also extreme," Mortesla continued. "And look at these weather patterns." Images flashed across the screen showing hurricanes, tornadoes, blizzards, and thunderstorms. To the Velthari, these looked like planetary catastrophes. But according to the human data they were intercepting, these were normal weather events that humans simply lived through. "Admiral, this planet isn't a Class 7 world. It's a Class 39 death world." HFY felt his skin go completely pale. Death worlds were theoretical in Velthari science. Planets so hostile that life couldn't possibly evolve beyond the simplest forms. The idea that an intelligent species could develop on such a world was considered impossible. "Continue the analysis," he ordered. The revelations got worse. Earth's surface was covered with active volcanoes, earthquake zones, and radiation sources. The planet was constantly bombarded by cosmic radiation that would sterilize most worlds. The temperature variations were extreme enough to kill most life forms. And somehow humans had not only survived in this environment, but had thrived. Meanwhile, on Earth, Dr. Kim Tae-won and Dr. Park Min-ji found themselves at the center of humanity's first contact with alien life. After Jinho had used his emergency satellite phone to report the aliens, governments around the world had finally taken the situation seriously. "So let me understand this correctly," said General Harrison, the American military liaison to the hastily formed International Task Force. "These aliens came here expecting to conquer us, but now they're too scared to get out of their ships?" "It's not quite that simple," Taewon explained. "From what we've learned through the translator devices, they're a peaceful species. They don't conquer worlds through military force. They just show up with superior technology and most species surrender immediately." "But we didn't surrender," added Min-ji. "We walked up and said hello. And apparently that's not how first contact usually works." Dr. Elena Kozlov, the Russian xenobiologist on the team, was studying the biological data they had gathered from the aliens. "Their physiology is fascinating. They evolved in a low-gravity aquatic environment. Their bones are hollow like birds. Their muscle density is about 1/10 of human standard. They're basically living jellyfish." "Which explains why they think we're monsters," said Dr. Yuki Tanaka from Japan. "To them, we must look like walking tanks." The true scope of the situation became clear when more humans around the world started making contact with the alien scout teams. Every interaction followed the same pattern. Humans approached without fear, demonstrated casual physical abilities that terrified the aliens, and treated advanced alien technology as merely interesting, rather than godlike. In Seoul, construction worker Oh Hyun-woo had become an internet celebrity after videos showed him helping alien engineers repair their ship. In the footage, Hyun-woo casually bent thick metal beams back into shape while the aliens watched in what could only be described as horror. "I don't understand what the big deal is," Hyun-woo said when interviewed by news crews. "They asked for help, so I helped. Sure, their technology is impressive, but it's not like it's magic or anything." That attitude turned out to be typical. Humans were impressed by alien technology but not overwhelmed by it. They treated the aliens like interesting visitors rather than godlike beings. And most disturbing of all from the Velthari perspective, humans kept offering to help fix problems with alien equipment. Back on the Velthari command ship, Admiral Kethvar was receiving reports that made his worst fears seem optimistic. The humans weren't just strong, they weren't just tough. They were also incredibly curious and eager to learn. When the aliens had demonstrated their energy weapons, humans had asked detailed questions about the physics involved. When they showed off their medical technology, human doctors had immediately started suggesting improvements. When they displayed their computers, human engineers had politely pointed out several design flaws. "Admiral," reported Commander Velkris, "from the surface, the humans have invited us to visit one of their cities. They want to show us their culture and technology." "Absolutely not," Kethvar replied immediately. "Do not go anywhere near their population centers." "But sir, they seem genuinely friendly. And their technology, while primitive, is surprisingly robust. This human Jinho showed me pictures of their space program. They're already traveling to other worlds in their system using chemical rockets. They're doing it the hard way, but they're doing it." Kethvar closed his eyes and tried to think. The Velthari had encountered hundreds of species across the galaxy. They had met warriors, scholars, artists, and engineers. But they had never met anyone like humans. A species that had been forged by their hostile world into something that was simultaneously terrifying and fascinating. "Commander," he said finally, "maintain peaceful contact, but do not agree to visit their cities. And whatever you do not give them any advanced technology." "Why not, sir?" Kethvar looked at the data showing Earth's classification as a death world, at the recordings of humans casually performing impossible feats of strength, at the reports of humans offering to improve alien technology. "Because," he said quietly, "I'm beginning to think that if we give these Deathworlders access to our technology, they won't need it. They'll just make it better." Admiral Kethvar had not slept in 3 days, which was concerning since Velthari normally slept every day to process the complex bioelectrical patterns in their nervous systems. Instead, he found himself constantly reviewing the growing pile of reports from Earth, each one more disturbing than the last. The latest report came from Science Officer Mortesla, who had been running combat simulations based on human capabilities. The results were catastrophic for any potential invasion force. "Admiral, I need to show you something," Mortesla said, her skin patterns flickering with distress. "I've been analyzing human recreational activities." "Their recreational activities?" Kethvar asked, confused. "Yes, sir. The things they do for fun." Mortesla activated the main display, which filled with images captured from human communication networks. "Look at this." The screen showed humans jumping out of aircraft thousands of feet above the ground, falling at terminal velocity, and deploying fabric wings at the last possible moment. The Velthari called this activity voluntary atmospheric descent and considered it a form of execution. "They call it skydiving," Mortesla explained. "They pay money to do this." For enjoyment, more images followed. Humans strapping themselves to long boards and riding down mountains at incredible speeds, dodging trees and rocks. Humans diving deep into crushing ocean depths without proper environmental suits. Humans climbing vertical rock faces using only their hands and feet. "This one is particularly disturbing," Mortesla continued, showing footage of humans running for hours at a time across desert landscapes in extreme heat. "They call it marathon running. Apparently, the name comes from an ancient human who ran so far that he died at the finish line. They commemorated this by making it a regular sporting event." Kethvar stared at the images in growing horror. "They deliberately expose themselves to lethal conditions for entertainment?" "It gets worse, sir. Look at this activity they call surfing. The screen showed humans standing on floating boards while massive walls of water crashed over them. They positioned themselves in the path of moving water masses that would crush most spacecraft, and they do it because they think it's fun. The Admiral's tentacles began to tremble. What do our combat simulations show? Mortesla's patterns darkened to deep purple, the Velthari equivalent of extreme anxiety. Admiral, based on human physical capabilities and their apparent immunity to environmental hazards, our invasion would result in catastrophic losses. Even with our technological advantages, the humans could probably defeat us using improvised weapons. Show me the projections. The display changed to show tactical analysis. Human reaction times were 4 times faster than Velthari standard. Their endurance was effectively unlimited compared to most galactic species. Their ability to function in hostile environments meant that standard Velthari tactics like environmental warfare would be useless. They can survive in vacuum for several minutes, Mortesla reported. They can function in radiation levels that would kill us instantly. They can operate at temperatures that would freeze our biosystems or boil our internal fluids. And Admiral, they can reproduce and maintain their population in these conditions. Kethvar felt his worst fears being confirmed. Are you telling me that these humans are essentially living weapons? Yes, sir. But that's not the most disturbing part. There's something worse than being living weapons? Yes, sir. They're curious living weapons. Every human team that has interacted with our technology has immediately started asking questions about how to improve it. They're not just physically superior, Admiral. They're engineers. Meanwhile, on Earth, the first official diplomatic meeting between humans and the Velthari was taking place in a conference room hastily set up at Seoul National University. Dr. Park Min-ji led the human delegation, which included diplomat Cho Young-ho and Captain Nam Soo-min from the Korean Special Forces. The meeting had been intended as humanity's formal introduction to galactic civilization, but it was turning into something very different. So you're telling us, Cho Young-ho said through the translation device, that most species surrender immediately when they see your ships? Commander Velchris, who was attending via hologram because the Velthari were too afraid to meet in person, confirmed this with a gesture that the humans had learned meant, yes. But why? Asked Dr. Park Min-ji. I mean, your technology is impressive, but it's not like you're threatening to destroy cities or anything. Most species recognize the futility of resistance when faced with superior technology, Velchris explained. Captain Nam Soo-min, who had been quietly listening, finally spoke up. With respect, your technology isn't that superior. I mean, it's advanced, sure, but we can see ways to improve most of it. The hologram of Velchris flickered as her shock disrupted the transmission. Improve it? Well, yes, Nam continued matter-of-factly. Your ships are beautiful, but they're not built for combat. Your weapons are designed for intimidation, rather than effectiveness, and your environmental suits would fail completely in Earth conditions. They're obviously designed for a much gentler world than ours. Dr. Min-ji pulled up some technical diagrams on her tablet. We've been analyzing the scans your people shared with us. Your hull design, for example, would collapse under the pressure variations in Earth's atmosphere during a storm, and your power systems are too dependent on stable environmental conditions, Cho Young-ho added diplomatically. We're not criticizing. It's just that your technology seems to be designed for a very peaceful, stable galaxy. It's beautiful engineering, but it's not built for the kind of world we live on. On the Velthari command ship, Admiral Kethvar was watching this conversation with growing dread. The humans weren't just analyzing Velthari technology. They were casually pointing out fundamental flaws that the Velthari hadn't even considered. Sir, reported Communications Officer Telvash, we're receiving similar reports from all our diplomatic contacts. The humans keep offering suggestions for technological improvements. What kind of suggestions? Well, the construction worker Oh Hyun-woo pointed out that our hull materials are too brittle for high-stress environments. The park ranger in Australia mentioned that our life support systems wouldn't work in extreme temperature variations, and the children in Canada asked why our vehicles don't have better suspension systems. Kethvar realized that the situation had moved far beyond a simple invasion that had gone wrong. The humans weren't just too tough to conquer. They were actively analyzing and improving upon technology that the Velthari considered the pinnacle of engineering. Sir, Mortesla said quietly, I've been thinking about something the humans mentioned. They said they live on a harsh world, but they seem to think this is normal. What if we're the unusual ones? What do you mean? What if most of the galaxy is actually full of death worlds like Earth, and we've just been lucky enough to find the few garden worlds where life is easy? What if humans represent what intelligent life normally looks like? The thought was terrifying. The Velthari had built their entire civilization on the assumption that they were the natural inheritors of the galaxy, destined to guide primitive species toward enlightenment. But what if they were actually the primitive ones? What if they were the fragile exception in a galaxy full of Deathworlders? Back on Earth, the diplomatic meeting was winding down with the humans extending an invitation that made Admiral HFY's blood run cold. "We'd love to show you around Earth," Dr. Minji was saying. "You could visit our cities, see our technology, meet our people. I think you'd find it fascinating. And if you're interested in improving your technology," added Captain Nam, "we have some excellent engineers who would love to work with you. We're always eager to learn new things and share what we know." Commander Velkris managed to politely decline the invitation, but HFY could see the writing on the wall. The humans weren't going to be conquered. They weren't going to be impressed into submission. Instead, they were offering to help, to share, to improve everything they touched. And that, HFY realized, was the most terrifying possibility of all. Because if the humans got access to galactic technology and started improving it, there would be no telling what they might become capable of. The emergency session of the Velthari High Council had been going for 6 hours, and Admiral HFY was running out of ways to explain how badly they had miscalculated the situation on Earth. "Let me understand this correctly," said High Counselor Murthane, her ancient tentacles quivering with disbelief. "You're telling us that we cannot conquer this world because the inhabitants are too friendly?" "With respect, Counselor, that's not exactly the problem," HFY replied. "The problem is that they're too dangerous to conquer and too useful to ignore." He activated the chamber's main display, showing the latest intelligence gathered from Earth. The images were becoming legendary throughout the Velthari fleet. Humans casually performing feats that would be considered superhuman by galactic standards, treating alien technology as interesting but improvable, and offering to help with everything from ship repairs to navigation problems. Furthermore, HFY continued, "Our xenobiologists have confirmed that Earth is a class-13 death world. The humans didn't just evolve on one of the most hostile planets in the galaxy. They've thrived there. They've turned surviving in lethal conditions into recreational activities." High Counselor Velnara leaned forward, her bioluminescent patterns showing deep concern. "What are you recommending, Admiral?" "Full withdrawal to a safe distance while we reconsider our entire approach to this species." The council chamber erupted in flickering lights as the assembled Velthari expressed their shock and dismay. Never in their history had they encountered a species that required this kind of response. "Admiral," called out Counselor Tervek, "surely you're not suggesting that we abandon our expansion into this system. I'm suggesting that we approach Earth as equals rather than conquerors. These humans represent something we've never encountered before, a species that's both physically superior to us and genuinely interested in peaceful cooperation." As the Velthari debated, similar conversations were taking place throughout the galaxy. News of the Death World species had spread through the interstellar communication networks, causing unprecedented alarm among the major galactic powers. The crystalline hegemony, which had been planning their own expansion into human space, immediately canceled all operations and declared Earth a protected system. The Hive collectives, after analyzing human recreational activities, classified the entire species as apex predators and established an exclusion zone around the Sol system. But it was the reaction of the ancient Watchers that truly changed everything. The Watchers were the oldest known species in the galaxy, so advanced that they rarely bothered with younger civilizations. Their message to the galactic community was brief but shocking. The humans are to be welcomed and protected. Any species that threatens them will face our direct intervention. On Earth, Dr. Kim Taewon and Dr. Park Minji found themselves at the center of humanity's entry into galactic politics, but not in the way anyone had expected. "So let me make sure I understand this," Dr. Taewon said to the Velthari diplomatic representative via quantum communication link. "Instead of conquering us, you want to establish us as a protected species?" "It's for everyone's safety," explained the representative, whose name translated roughly as gentle current. Humans appear to be what our xenobiologists are calling a apex survivor species. You've evolved capabilities that make you extremely dangerous, but you seem to prefer cooperation to conquest. Dr. Minji laughed. We're not dangerous. We're just from a planet with tough weather. Dr. Park, with all due respect, yesterday one of your construction workers helped repair our ship by reshaping metal components with his bare hands. Our metallurgists are still trying to figure out how he generated enough force to do that without tools. Oh, you mean Hunwoo? He's just really strong. Comes from working construction for 20 years. The alien representative's silence spoke volumes about how differently humans and the rest of the galaxy viewed physical capability. Meanwhile, Lee Jinho had become something of a celebrity throughout the galaxy. His simple act of walking up to armed aliens and treating them like slightly interesting tourists had redefined first contact protocols for dozens of species. The recording of him casually lifting a boulder while asking about alien technology had been viewed billions of times across the galactic networks. I still don't understand what the big deal is, Jinho told the reporters gathered around his campsite, which had become an impromptu diplomatic zone. They're just visitors from space. Sure, they're different from us, but so are people from other countries. You treat visitors with respect and try to help them if they need it. That simple. Philosophy had apparently revolutionized galactic thinking about interspecies relations that Captain Nam Suman was leading, the first human expedition to visit other worlds, accompanying a Velthari science mission to a nearby system. The aliens had been extremely nervous about bringing a human into space, but Nam had insisted that it was perfectly safe. The environmental suits your people designed for us are excellent, she reported during her first transmission from the alien ship, though I did suggest a few modifications to make them more durable. The Velthari engineers seemed very interested in our recommendations. What the aliens didn't mention to Earth was that Nam's suggestions had resulted in a complete redesign of their life support systems. The humans had looked at technology designed for the genteel worlds of the galactic community and immediately saw ways to make it tougher, more reliable, and more efficient. Captain Nam has also volunteered to test potentially hazardous environments that our own people cannot safely enter, reported Commander Velcris. She seems genuinely excited about the opportunity to explore dangerous worlds. Back on Earth, the changes were happening rapidly. The Velthari had offered to share their knowledge of the galaxy, but they seemed more interested in learning from humans than teaching them. Alien scientists were fascinated by human engineering, which was designed to work in conditions that would destroy most galactic technology. Oh Hyunwoo found himself consulting for alien engineers who wanted to understand how to build things that could survive in extreme environments. What the aliens considered extreme, humans considered Tuesday. They keep asking how we make things so strong, Hyunwoo explained to a news crew. I told them we just build everything like it has to survive a typhoon, an earthquake, and a really angry customer. They seemed to think that was profound engineering philosophy. Dr. Minji was working with xenobiologists from across the galaxy who were trying to understand how life could evolve to such dangerous levels. Her research into human physiology had become required reading in alien universities. The fascinating thing, she explained to her alien colleagues, is that we don't consider ourselves particularly tough. We've just adapted to our environment. Every species does that. The alien scientists found this humble attitude even more disturbing than human physical capabilities. A species that could casually lift tons of weight and survive in conditions that would kill most life forms, but considered this normal? It challenged everything they thought they knew about evolution and survival. As months passed, it became clear that humanity's entry into galactic civilization was unlike any first contact in recorded history. Instead of being conquered or guided by advanced aliens, humans were being treated as the galaxy's new apex species, dangerous, but hopefully friendly. The Velthari established a permanent embassy on Earth, but they built it in orbit rather than on the surface. For safety reasons, they explained, though everyone understood they meant their own safety rather than humanity's. Admiral Kethvar, who had been promoted to ambassador to Earth, found himself in the strangest position of his career, representing a galactic empire to a species that could probably conquer that empire if they ever got angry enough. The humans have accepted our offer of galactic citizenship, he reported to the High Council. They seem genuinely excited about exploring other worlds and meeting new species. They've also offered to help improve our defensive capabilities in case we encounter any truly hostile species. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The galaxy's most dangerous species was offering to help protect everyone else. And in his small campsite in the Korean mountains, Lee Jinho continued his hiking, blissfully unaware that his simple decision to walk up and say hello to some interesting visitors had changed the course of galactic history. As far as he was concerned, he had just met some friendly tourists who happened to be from very far away, which, when he thought about it, was really what first contact should have been about all along.